Texas Intern Rights 2026. When are unpaid internships legal? Welcome to this legal education presentation. In Texas, unpaid internships are governed by a combination of federal law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and state labor statutes. Understanding when an internship can lawfully be unpaid requires careful analysis of the seven-factor primary beneficiary test adopted by federal courts and enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. As stated on the official website of the U.S. Department of Labor at dol.gov, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 requires for-profit employers to pay minimum wage and overtime to employees. But interns may not be considered employees under the FLSA if the internship is primarily educational. Courts apply what is called the primary beneficiary test. Texas follows federal FLSA standards, and the Texas Payday Act, found in the Texas Labor Code Chapter 61, also governs wage payment. The Texas Workforce Commission at twc.texas.gov handles wage claims. Current law. Who is covered under New York workers' compensation law? To understand why this bill matters, you need to know who is currently covered under the New York workers' compensation law. The current definition of employee is specific, and unpaid interns are nowhere in it. New York WCL Section 2, subsection 5, defines employee to include most people working for another for compensation, full-time and part-time workers, public employees, corporate officers, and minors lawfully employed. However, the definition hinges on the existence of a wage, salary, or other form of compensation. Unpaid interns who perform work for a for-profit or nonprofit entity without promise of wages do not meet the statutory definition of employee. As a result, they have no right to workers' compensation benefits under WCL Sections 10, 13, and 15. Employers who host unpaid interns also face a unique risk. Because the intern is not covered by workers' compensation, the exclusivity remedy provision of WCL Section 11 does not apply. This means an injured intern can sue the employer for negligence in civil court, potentially for far more than workers' compensation benefits would cost. The proposed bill. What it would change. The proposed New York bill takes a targeted approach. Rather than overhauling the entire workers' compensation system, it makes a specific addition to the existing definition of employee in WCL Section 2, subsection 5. Here's what it does. The bill adds any person performing work as an unpaid intern to the WCL Section 2, subsection 5, definition of employee. It defines an unpaid intern as someone who performs work for an employer without a promise of compensation, in a position that provides training or educational experience. The bill carves out bona fide volunteers for charitable organizations. For workers' compensation premium purposes, the bill establishes a minimum imputed wage for unpaid interns set at the New York State minimum wage, projected at $16.50 per hour in 2026, so that insurers can calculate appropriate premiums. This ensures that covering interns is administratively feasible for insurance carriers. The bill does not change employers' obligations under the Fair Labor Standards Act regarding whether an internship must be paid or unpaid. It only addresses workers' compensation coverage. This preserves the existing Department of Labor primary beneficiary test framework for unpaid internships. The coverage gap. Why it matters. The gap in workers' compensation coverage for unpaid interns is not just a technical legal issue. It has real consequences. Every year, thousands of unpaid interns in New York work in environments where injuries can and do occur. According to data cited in worker safety studies, approximately 37% of unpaid interns report experiencing a workplace injury or near miss during their internship. Common injuries include repetitive strain from office work, slips and falls, and more serious incidents in lab, field, or construction settings. Currently, an unpaid intern who is injured on the job has no automatic right to medical care through workers' compensation. They must rely on personal health insurance if they have it, or pay out of pocket. If they do not have insurance, which is common among students and young adults, they may face significant medical debt. For employers, the absence of workers' compensation coverage creates a legal vulnerability. Because the intern cannot claim workers' compensation benefits, the intern can file a civil lawsuit for negligence. Under WCL Section 11, the exclusive remedy provision that normally protects employers does not apply when the injured person is not a covered employee. What the bill means for interns, new benefits available. If the bill becomes law, unpaid interns in New York would gain access to the same workers' compensation benefits as paid employees. This is a significant expansion of worker protections. Full medical treatment for work-related injuries and illnesses, including doctor visits, hospital care, surgery, prescription medications, and physical therapy. The employer's workers' compensation carrier would pay all authorized medical costs directly, with no copays or deductibles. Imputed lost wage replacement. Because unpaid interns do not receive wages, the bill provides for a minimum imputed weekly wage based on the New York minimum wage. Disability benefits would be calculated at 2/3 of this imputed wage, subject to the same caps and limits as paid employees under WCL Section 15. Permanent partial disability benefits if the injury results in lasting impairment, death benefits to dependents in case of a fatality under WCL Section 16, and vocational rehabilitation services. The intern would also gain the right to choose their own doctor after a certain period, same as any covered employee. Employer impact, compliance, and cost considerations. The bill would create new obligations for employers who host unpaid interns. Understanding these requirements is essential for compliance. Employers would need to verify that their workers' compensation policy covers unpaid interns or obtain an endorsement. Premiums would be calculated based on a minimum imputed wage, meaning even unpaid interns generate some premium cost. For small businesses, this could be a modest but noticeable increase. Record-keeping requirements would include tracking intern hours, job duties, and any injury reports. Employers must post notice of workers' compensation coverage and ensure interns know how to report injuries. The Workers' Compensation Board may provide guidance materials specifically for intern coverage. However, there is a significant benefit for employers. Once covered, the workers' compensation system becomes the exclusive remedy for workplace injuries. An intern cannot sue in civil court. They are limited to workers' compensation benefits. This reduces litigation risk and provides cost predictability. National context. How other states handle this. New York is not alone in considering this issue. Several states have already addressed workers' compensation coverage for interns, and more are debating it. Understanding the national landscape provides important context. California law, Labor Code Section 3351, defines employee to include interns only if wages are paid. Unpaid interns in California generally remain uncovered by workers' compensation, though they have other protections under California labor law. This means the New York bill would go further than California's current framework. Oregon, ORS 656.027, requires mandatory workers' compensation coverage for all workers, including unpaid interns and volunteers in many circumstances. Oregon is one of the most protective states. Washington State allows employers to elect coverage for unpaid interns. Massachusetts has a bill pending similar to New York's proposal. The trend across states is moving toward inclusion. As internship programs grow, especially in for-profit settings, more legislatures are recognizing that the statutory exclusion of unpaid interns from workers' compensation creates an unacceptable gap in the social safety net. Debate, support, and opposition. As with any significant workers' compensation reform, the proposal to cover unpaid interns has generated debate among stakeholders. Understanding both perspectives helps inform your own view. Supporters argue that basic fairness demands that all people performing work, even without pay, deserve protection if they are injured. They point out that interns are often young, inexperienced, and at higher risk of injury. They also argue that the current system creates perverse incentives. Employers save on workers' compensation premiums, but face unlimited tort liability. Opponents, particularly business groups and nonprofits, argue that the added cost of workers' compensation premiums for interns could discourage employers from offering internship programs. They note that many small businesses and nonprofits operate on tight margins and that imputed wage-based premiums add an administrative burden. The bill represents a balancing act, worker protection versus program availability. The debate continues as the bill moves through the New York Assembly and Senate. Checking the bill's status at nycnate.gov will keep you informed about amendments and hearings. Summary and resources. How to stay informed. This bill represents an important potential change to New York workers' compensation law. Whether you're an intern, employer, educator, or policymaker, understanding the issue is the first step. Current New York WCL excludes unpaid interns from workers' compensation coverage. The proposed bill would amend the definition of employee to include unpaid interns, giving them the same rights to medical care, disability benefits, and death benefits as paid employees. Employers would gain the protection of the exclusive remedy doctrine. The bill provides for imputed wage calculations based on the New York minimum wage for premium and benefit purposes, making compliance administratively feasible. It does not change FLSA internship classification rules. Stay informed by following the bill on the New York State Senate website at nysenate.gov, checking guidance from the Workers' Compensation Board at wcb.ny.gov, and reviewing DOL Fact Sheet 71 at dol.gov. The QR codes throughout this presentation link directly to these official resources. This presentation is educational only and does not constitute legal advice.